Yeah. So the biggest overhaul came in the reading section. So the old paper test used to have 5 long reading passages of like 750 words or more. Now what they've done is instead of having one 750 word passage with 10 questions to it, they give you one smaller 150 to 200 word paragraph and one question for it. So that's been like the biggest change. Now, the funny thing is, students say, oh, then this is going to be a way easier test. Like, I should definitely do the digital SAT. And my response to that is yes and no. You know, if you have a shorter attention span, is this going to be better for you? Absolutely. But these passages, even though they're this big, they're deceivingly dense with information. It's like a different kind of reading that you have to do to get the question right. There's a lot of things that still apply as far as like finding synonyms in the text to the answer choices. Like some of the strategies are still working, but then there's some new strategies like afoot that work better for this particular test versus the paper one. Yeah. And then, as far as grammar, the grammar is about the same, right? Like they just did away with some things. Like they kind of pared down on the grammar. There's a big focus on punctuation. There's a big focus on transitions. And for the English, if you guys aren't studying vocabulary, you better start studying vocabulary because vocabulary is coming back full force. You've got to know vocabulary now, which is challenging. I think that honestly is the great equalizer on the English sections. The vocabulary is what is preventing students from getting a high 700 or a perfect score. So the math is interesting, like I'm even telling my digital SAT students, you can still look at some paper tests and practice out of the paper tests. I would say like
Okay.
85, 90% of the concepts translate. There's just a few new things on the math that are important to know. They're getting more like interpretive. So
Mm.
they'll give you an equation and they'll be like, what does 3 mean in this context? And 3 will be like the coefficient in front of X. They're doing that because you can have a calculator on the whole thing now. So, like, they know that they've got to make questions where you can't necessarily use the calculator. So, these interpretive, like, high level conceptual ones are really coming in. But, like, hands down, the biggest thing I'm teaching my students with the math is how to leverage that Desmos calculator. Because, like, systems, if they give you a complicated system or a complicated algebra problem, because the algebra looks harder on this test. And when you get to the end of the modules, it's intimidating. And when you look at College Board's answer explanations, they're like huge. And it's like, what? What are they talking about? I'm not doing that in a minute and a half. But if you just type it into Desmos, it's so easy to find the answers. You just need to know what you're looking for graphically. And some students are like, but I'll just use my TA84. I really like my TA84. You guys, the Desmos is way better because you can use a slider. So you can move your graph around, you can move it side to side, you can move it till you get what you want, and you can't do that on a TI-84.
There's also been the modular structure of the SAT, the digital SAT now, right? Where you have it's adaptive, which that wasn't the case before.
And it's an interesting design because typically, at least the tests I've seen, are adapted by question. You do well on a question, you get a little bit harder of a question. Then you do well on that, you get a little bit harder of a question. But this is by section. So what they do is module one, they give you a baseline module. It's a mixture of easies, mediums, and hards. To be honest with you, I think it's a fairly easy overall section. And they're just assessing your skills to see where you're at. Now, if you end up missing more than like roughly 10 questions on module one, you're done. Like you're going to get an easier module two. And I've run actually like tests on the algorithm. And if you get the easier module two, you're not going to get in the 600s even. You'll be lucky if you get a high 500. Yeah. I like specifically got like 11 questions wrong on module one and then got the easier second module and I answered them all right and I got a 580. So module one is imperative. You have to do well on module one. Otherwise, you have no hope of getting a score that's like above the national average. Here's one other thing though that's like kind of crazy. On the flip side, when you get the hard second module, these questions, the hard ones, are worth 30 points. So if you get one wrong, like you can get more points because you're getting
Hmm.
more of these higher point value questions right. But if you get one wrong, sometimes you can drop by 30 points. So I ran another trial where I got everything right on module 1 and everything right on module 2 except for one question, and I got a 770. So there, like with the digital SAT, there's less questions than the paper test. So the margin for error is slim. Like you could get, it was more forgiving on the paper. You could get a little bit more wrong and still get like a high 700. This one drops you down quickly.
So
Yeah.
the days of like, it's when you looked at your raw score, let's say like you answered 40 questions and you got 39 out of 40 questions correct in the paper-based version of the SAT, you could still get a perfect SAT score for that section, right? But are you saying now if you don't get a 100% score on the raw version, like 40 out of 40 questions correctly, you don't get a perfect score?
On any of the practice exams on Blue Book, which is the app that you use to take these practice tests, I have not seen that be the case. However, they were just rolling out the digital SAT, and I think they've been making tweaks to the algorithm. So who knows what's going to happen in 2024? I think it really comes down to that standard deviation bell curve. They want to make sure that these scores are dispersed in a way that would make sense. So if they notice that high, like 2.5% on the curve, if they look at that and they recognize most people are missing a question, then they might be more forgiving. We'll just have to see. I feel like every test is different. I have students come back after one test and they all crushed it. And then the next test, the algorithm was just like brutal. So it's hard to really tell right now, you know, what's going on.
If you're ready to embark on the exciting journey of graduate admissions in the United States, make sure you're fully prepared by downloading our free ebook, The International Student's Guide to Studying in the United States. Inside, you will find a comprehensive roadmap detailing everything you need to know to succeed. So don't miss out. Click the link in the description section below to download your free copy now.